So good evening and welcome. This is Conversations for a One Planet region for the 25th of February 2021. And I am going to share my screen and let our opening slideshow run for a couple of minutes, and then we will start the program. And of course, in this case, we should particularly mention that Sooke Nation too, since we are featuring them on this session. So just want to emphasize this, and I'm going to get Gary and or Claire to talk briefly about this. We're going to be launching a participatory learning process and set of a study circle. And we're also going to be, or have just launched, as you will have seen in your emails, a fundraising effort with sponsorship from Glyn Evans. We're very grateful for that. And I think we have all of our board members here today in this session. So I am just going to come out of the slideshow in the interests of moving the program along. And before I talk a bit about tonight's session, which I will just put up here, and then I'll come back to, I'd like to give Gary and or Claire a couple of minutes to just talk about the plans that they are developing for a participatory learning set of 6 sessions coming up, we hope, in March.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if Claire's there. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Claire's there?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Claire, did you want me to start just for a minute and then
Sure.
you jump in for a minute?
Sure.
Does that sound right? Okay, so hi everybody. My name's Gary McDougall. I live here in Victoria. I've been here for over 20 years, and I just want to say thank you first, and to acknowledge that I'm on Lekwungen territory, and that I carry that especially in my day-to-day actions, thinking about the people that came before me, and also in gardening. I garden on our property here. I grow lots of food. I grow year-round, and I kind of came into conversations with just a sincere kind of care for the planet, and understanding that I have 3 children. I'm a husband and father of 3, and recognize that we need to change as a species on this planet if we want to sustain the planet for the future generations. So acknowledging that Conversations for One Planet acknowledges that we're consuming too much resources and that we have to change. And I'm really motivated and inspired to do that. So I came to conversations recognizing that they honor the earth and that we need to make change. So I started having this conversation with Claire, and she's like, hey, we should start something. And I was really inspired by that. Claire's into gardening as well. We had a lot in common. We had great conversations. And now we're about to launch this participatory learning group that Claire can tell us a little bit more about.
So yeah, and conversations have, we've been meeting with a group of people talking about participatory learning and really wanting to take the conversations that we'd been having through these monthly meetings, but take them a lot deeper and specifically focused on what it means to live in a one planet region as an ecological civilization. So the program is going to run for 6 weeks, and it's designed to sort of take, really allow that conversation to go deeper. So I hope you look out for the email that that Trevor will be sending, and it'll be on our website as well. So cool. Thanks, Trevor.
Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you. So with that, I'm going to move us into the discussion here. I'm just going to share my screen for another moment or so. So on this slide here, just to pick up on something that Claire said, we really have three big sort of strategic directions that we're trying to move in. Expanding the conversation, so engaging more participants, recording these and making them available is a small part of that. Deepening the conversation, so the participatory learning project that Claire and Gary just described is an example of that, and connecting to others doing similar work. And we're doing a lot of that. For example, I'm currently working with the Community Social Planning Council. We're hoping to put on a workshop on donut economics for a One Planet region sometime in Earth Week in April, and things like that. So we have a number of things going on at the same time. But this evening, what we're going to be doing is talking very specifically about the Sooke Nation and Sooke in transition. And many of us have heard about the interesting things that are happening in Sooke Nation and interesting things that are happening in Sooke with Transition Sooke and with the district. And so we have a representative from each of them. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time introducing them. Andrew Moore is with the Sooke Nation and has been their manager of special projects for a long time. And I actually hadn't realized until talking with him earlier today that he also co-founded Transition Sooke. And then Michael Taycon, who is the current president of Transition Sooke, and Tony St. Pierre, who is a councillor with the District of Sooke. And in talking with the three of them earlier this week, what we decided to do was the interesting thing about what's going on in Sooke, and I think it speaks very much to the discussions we had, the conversations we had in the fall, is that yes, you could get into the technical details of how the solar energy system works or what co-housing is like. Michael lives in the co-housing in Sooke and so on. But in talking with them, what really comes across is that it's all rooted deeply in values, the sort of thing that Gary was just talking about, in fact. And so that notion of values, and particularly of Indigenous values, I don't know how many of you were able to join at 1 o'clock the Yes Magazine session with Jeremy Lent and Winona LaDuke, and I forget the name of the third speaker. But a good chunk of that was dealing with issues about being rooted in Indigenous values. And certainly, I know Winona LaDuke is a member of the Anishinaabe Nation, First Nation. And the work I'm currently doing with some colleagues in the South Pacific who are Tongan and Maori speaks to Indigenous values and their importance in this whole transition. And so we're going to, I suspect, end up having a lot of discussion between the three of us and then with you about those values. And then, of course, in the second hour, we will break out into breakout groups where you'll have a chance to talk about what you take from the discussion that we're about to embark on and what that means for the municipalities and the regions, the communities where you live, and for your own lives. So we're going to start with Andrew. I will let him do whatever additional introductions he needs, but he's going to make some opening remarks. And then Michael Taycon is going to talk about Transition Sooke and the work that they do. And then we'll end up with Tony St. Pierre. And then really it will be a dialogue for a bit between the three of them, and then we can entertain comments and questions from you, and you can use the chat box too to do that if you wish. So with that, Andrew, if you would like to unmute, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I'm speaking from the Sooke territory, and need to acknowledge that. And I need to acknowledge that Chief Gordon Planis happy that I'm here I'm not speaking on his behalf. He wouldn't be happy about that, but is happy that I'm talking about our work at the Sooke Nation. Particularly as I'm going to attempt to give an Indigenous perspective on not just Sooke, but the wider society, and which may sound a bit odd on account of my accent, coming from London, UK, the centre of colonialism. The chief is quite happy. He's actually got a special name for me because I'm the only vegetarian on reserve. He calls me the lazy hunter. So he's quite well aware of what I do. So I'm going to start, as I said, with Indigenous perspective of my version of it, and a bit of history, because as you probably all know, that the University of Victoria Archaeology Department have been doing digs up at Sooke near Bella Bella, and what they've discovered is that the Sooke Nation has been there continuously for 14,000 years. So that's 3 times the age of the pyramids. And they even lived through an ice age. The main island that they live on wasn't snowed over, iced over. So it's pretty extraordinary that, you know, on our coast here, that civilizations have been living here for that long. And particularly when, by contrast, you see that the settlers have been here, what, 500 years, if that, and have brought us to the edge of extinction. So looking at what we were talking about earlier on, the values, what are the values that have enabled one civilization to live for 14,000 years and another to scarcely get to 500 years? And so most indigenous communities in the world are animists. So animist is someone who sees the sacred in everything. If you actually look it up in the dictionary, it'll say everything, they see that everything has a soul. And so if you, and I'm very aware of this, I've been working at the Sooke Nation for about 12 years now, and you're very clear that there's a reverence for nature that isn't in the wider society. So if you were to be invited onto the Sooke Nation, the chief will take you around and he'll say, "This is our sacred river," pointing to the Sooke River. It brings our food to us. It brings fish to the salmon that come up the river every year. And these are our sacred trees. These are our sacred forests, our woodlots. And then these are our sacred people. How often are you called a sacred person? And then they even say, "This is our sacred Tim Hortons." And it's named after the mountain just behind it. So when you have that reverence for everything around you and everybody around you, it's a great contrast to the values that we settlers have brought from Europe, which is really all about exploitation of resources, the fish in the same river that are almost now extinct, that have overfished, the trees that are hardly left, and the exploitation of people too. So the contrast couldn't be more clear that what we were just talking about, the values. So we might talk about values, but the way we live them is very different. So the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, has probably given us 10 years to clean up our act and fundamentally change the way we live, or to die a slow, painful death, not just us, but all living creatures. So I'm usually told I simplify problems, solutions. So I'm saying, why don't we all become animists? Why don't we all see the sacred in everything and everyone as a shortcut? I mean, we've only got 10 years. We compromise everything that we do. So the chance of us getting through the 10 years. And why not experience the joys of creation, and instead of the tired old ways of our sort of competitive capitalist system that's slowly killing us? That's just food for thought on the values that we have options to change in the next 10 years. That's it, actually.
Andrew, thank you. And it's those values, of course, that then drive the Sooke Nation to do the sort of things that you do in the, I was going to say in the mechanical sense, that's not quite right, but in the work you've done around solar power and things like that.
Yes, yeah.
That's the root of it.
Yes, quite, yeah.
So, Michael, if we can turn to you, would you like to talk a bit about Transition Sooke and perhaps build on the start that Andrew has given us?
It's muted.
You're muted, Michael.
There we go. Yes, good evening, everybody. Yes, great to see everybody here. Yes, I am Michael Taycon, and I am the president of Transition Sooke, which is short for the Sooke Transition Town Society, which was created in 2010, 2011 by a small group of people. One of Jeff is here, I think, was one of the witnesses to our birth as a moving force in Sooke. And we are basically a citizen-based volunteer and public interest group focused on creating a sustainable, resilient, and secure community that meets the challenges of the climate emergency in the Sooke region. It comes from, it's a part of a worldwide network of transition towns, which was founded in Totnes, England in 2005 by Rob Hopkins. In 2011, Sooke became the 346th community in the world to be recognized by the International Transition Network. So we're part of this huge network of places all over the place. And there's several groups like this on the island here in Comox and the valley, of course, Carriacou Valley. So there's people involved in this all over. One of the things that I really appreciate is that the size of Sooke and where it's at in its development is ideal for doing the transition model, because it really is about people knowing each other, working together for the sake of the community, bringing the changes that seem to need to happen. And so I'll leave it there as far as that goes. So we act as a resource that builds awareness with the Sooke community and with different levels of government to develop creative solutions to sustainability and climate change. Transition Sooke holds virtual and in-person workshops and town halls, makes presentations to council and its committees, publishes stories and posts in the mainstream and social media, develops educational resources, hosts a website and a Facebook page, and finally sends out a monthly newsletter. We have about 400 and something people in our mailing list, email list, and we have a group of very active members who really are the ones that make the decisions to what we're doing, of about 50 people. And I'm 80 years old, and I've been president of Transition Sooke for quite a number of years, as was Jeff, my friend Jeff Bateman, who is here tonight, was also president for a while. And, you know, it's been a great privilege to do this work. Transition Sooke's members and supporters who come from diverse backgrounds and experiences work together cooperatively and democratically to create positive change. We support and collaborate with other groups and individuals who share our concerns and values. For example, we worked with the Sooke Region Food Cheese Society. And this was actually was founded a little bit earlier than Transition Sooke. And they were very concerned about food security and about working with local farmers to improve things and the challenges they face to make a living or to be viable as a source of food for the district. We also have a very good working relationship with the mayor and the council of the District of Sooke that's developed over the years, and we're really proud of that and trying to do the best we can to make that work. What do we do? Transition Sooke is working on specific initiatives in response to the climate emergency. In a nutshell, we can say that our big picture goals require that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions dramatically and to adapt to the changing climate. So those are two, key words. We're going to be spending a lot of time dealing with the greenhouse gas reduction issue. It's a big piece in everything that we do. So some of those teams that have been formed, some of them are active and some of them are less so since we've been in lockdown. But we have a good team doing fossil fuel free transportation and infrastructure, green energy for commercial and residential buildings, divestment from fossil fuels, building a local economy, self-sufficiency and secure local food and agriculture in cooperation with Food Chi, rainwater harvesting with one of our workshops that we did. We have a number of people who live west of us here in Shirley and Otter Point, where they've been having trouble with their water supply because of the nature of the cycle in summer here, where creeks dry up and water sources dry up too. So there was the idea of rainwater harvesting was a workshop that we did, and the guy who did it for us came with equipment, filtering equipment, and how it's all done. So that was both not only a values meeting, but it was also very much a technical thing. Of course, we hear our work is also involving supporting and helping to shape the official community plan that's now in progress. And we also had a group dealing with what I call climate angst, the sorrow, the grief of losing so much in the face of what's going on. So that's the kind of things that came out of the emergency. The other things were more things that happened before on a regular basis, like pesticide education. We have a multi-belief initiative, a working group of men and women from very diverse religious and traditions, spiritual traditions, and they've done a big job of creating a Sooke Compassion Action Plan. They've been recognized by getting Sooke declared as a compassionate community by the Charter for Compassion International. And we've been working with things like with other people, of course, with other organizations to do something about homelessness. And we've had a team working on that. Wildwise Sooke is a wildlife education program that's been under our auspices for the last few years and is about to go solo as an independent society. And they're doing great work helping to lessen the need to kill bears and cougars by helping people to do something about their use of where they leave their food and things like that. We have a zero waste Sooke, which is something that's really becoming more and important to dealing with waste. We have they have repair cafes, and we have a Transition Sooke book club. So those are some of the things that we're involved in. So when the COVID-19 came knocking on our doors almost a year ago, events like the Green New Deal Town Hall, or an electric car extravaganza, or a tour of sustainable houses in the Sooke region, or an Earth Day event, all big events had to be set aside. Instead, we worked with the Sooke Region Lifelong Learning Group to put on a series of sessions entitled Towards a Green Economy, Climate Champions. In May 2020, we participated in a backyard garden project to help people grow food right where they live. And again, that was with several outfits, including Food Chi and the Garden Club and things of this kind. Through our climate emergency team, we made a pitch to Sooke Council requesting that climate change be an overarching framework for Sooke's new OCP, and much more. On a personal note, I am now participating in the activities of the District of Sooke Climate Action Committee. There are 6 women and 3 men newly appointed, plus Councillor Jeff Bateman, who is the liaison person with the Mayor and Council. As I come to the end of what I have to say on my notes here, I want to say how proud I am to be in service to this remarkable and enthusiastic group of volunteers who represent the heart and mind of Transition Sooke. Many have become dear friends. This region we live in is a special place, attracting many people to join our community. We're going through a significant and wide-ranging transition right here as we strive to become a one planet oriented community to restore balance in our relationship with the natural world. We are continuing our work in spite of the limitations imposed by COVID-19. We invite you to join us and get involved. For all of us, and for our children and our grandchildren. Thank you to Trevor Hancock and all of you supporting conversations for a one planet region. Haishka Siam. So that's my kind of printed, and I just want to say that I've lived in a number of parts of Canada, and when I came to Sooke in 2004 and began to, look around and see what was going on, I've had some of the best experiences of community spirit that better than anything I've had in my life at that stage, and that's when I was in my 70s. So, there's something magical about the people who are being drawn to this place. And, for example, we were at the beginning working with Sooke Chi. We were working on developing a community garden, and it was involved in right from the very beginning, and saw how the community made it happen. And it was magic. It was absolutely magic. I mean, you need to have that kind of mobilization now to get on with it. So I'm very glad to be here, and I think that's enough from me. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much. And I was sort of interested, we might circle back to this point. I'm reflecting on your point that size matters in as much as you're small enough. That I'm somewhat reminded of the Vinyl Cafe slogan, we're not big, but we're small. And I think that's a very interesting point. I know for the European Healthy Cities project that I was involved with for many years, the best healthy city of the 30 or so in the first phase of the project was the smallest. Now it was 70,000 people, about the same size as the city of Victoria, but it was the best project. I think that issue of how we come down to even a neighborhood level to make this work is really important. And so we might circle back to that. And of course, people can make comments in the chat box or ask questions. But I'm going to turn to Tony St. Pierre, who is a councillor with the District of Sooke. And Tony, I'll leave it to you to build on what we've heard from Andrew and Michael and relate that to the work of the Sooke Council.
Thank you very much, Trevor. So I guess I'll start by saying that we did buy the farm in Sooke, and we thought a lot about it before doing that. And we talked to various people who we wanted to find out where could we find a place with a sense of community. We felt that in terms of climate action, the crisis, we weren't moving fast enough to not have impacts, and we needed to go to a place that had resilience. And we were really missing a sense of community where we were. And honestly, where we were could have been almost anywhere. But in Sooke, and actually there were quite a few beautiful places, but in Sooke, people were smiling. In Sooke, you could actually feel a pride of place. And I think that's what Michael was talking about. In Sooke, people were actually smiling to me at the checkout and calling by my name within weeks. We were welcomed within the farming community almost immediately. I tried to start a transition town in my own previous community. Fell completely flat. My wife tried having a block party just to try to bring people together. People smiled for a while, but then it all went back to the same old, same old. In Sooke, they already had a transition town. So I joined up. Right away, I had the kind of connection that Michael was talking about. Basically, almost immediately, I was taken in. Now, there's the people who've been in Sooke for the longest while, and they provide a core of these community values. There's more volunteer organizations in Sooke than you can believe, doing all kinds of things. Sometimes at cross purposes, but that's part of the fun. But that's part of the resilience too. So you've got the Lions and the Rotaries. Hi, Norm. You've got Sooke Food Chi and Transition Sooke and any number of other groups. And all of them have built a fabric in the community. Now, what I would suggest is that in a previous conversation, we were trying to figure out, okay, what is the Sooke, how is Sooke actually different? And I think that's where the difference is. And I'm not sure how to actually make that happen in another community. I think in other places we've been talking about, or one plan has been talking about placemaking. And I think that's truly important. I think Andrew pointed to animism and the sacred in all things, but part of the sacred in all things is recognizing the sacred in ourselves. And because of the sacred in ourselves, our connection to the sacred in all things. And I think it's that connection that most of us are lacking. One of the things that happened before COVID was that I actually went to a conference. And at that conference, they had researchers from the University of Montreal, and they did some beautiful work to show that no matter how much money you put into economics, into building business, into increasing people's wealth, it would make very little difference in terms of resilience. Things would still turn out pretty poorly, and people would generally be unhappy no matter how many they had beyond a certain point. But those same researchers also showed that if you had placemaking, if you built connections, if people felt specifically connected to their friends first, family, their neighborhood, their town, their region, and their country, they could be happy because of that connection. We spend a lot of time trying to increase people's wealth. We spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to fix business. And that's a good thing to do because that also makes us resilient, diversified. And that's something we need to do locally instead of being dependent on a global economy. But as governments and local governments and as people, we have to actually try and figure out how to connect. And I think that that's actually the critical thing in terms of values, valuing connection. After World War II, the white picket fence, the nuclear family, being available to jump at a good job and run off and make more money and spend as much as possible were the values that were being promoted. There was the idea that everybody be in a flying car, they would be going to the stars, that unlimited growth was possible, and that all we had to do was keep consuming as much as possible, and we would have a paradise. These are the values that we have to try and shake off now. These were values that led to disconnection. And right now many of us lack that connection. We have to just rediscover it. And fortunately for millennia, we actually had those connections. So it's not like it's not a part of who we are. And it's not like we can't actually rediscover what that might mean now. But I think that when you talk about democracy and values, that's a big part of it. I think the last thing I'd like to say, if I haven't spoken for too long, I'm not really sure if I should speak it more, but whatever, is that Transition Sooke was actually vital and instrumental in terms of my actually running for council. One of the many events that they actually put on was a talk with Starhawk, fairly well-known activist. And during that talk, she was shocked and appalled because Donald Trump had just been elected. And she basically begged everyone in the room, if you can run for office do it. If you can make a difference, do it. And she talked about in the UK, in Glastonbury, around Stonehenge, they had people running around that were wearing beautiful robes and so on and so forth, and very spiritual, and would never touch politics because it was just too dirty and too real and too materialistic. And because of that, they were fracking in the area. So what she had to say was step up, do what you can. And I think that in Sooke, the people of Sooke were ready for something different, but they needed people to step up. And a lot of people stepped up. We have a very different council now. We have a strategic plan that actually enshrines maintaining our sense of identity as our first goal. Managing our growth wisely, the word wisely is there, and making our local economy diverse with a side order of affordable housing. And we've been able to work on pushing those things forward with the support of the community and with Transition Sooke and all the other organizations and with the people of Sooke. And our committees are filled with amazing people. People in Sooke care deeply about Sooke. And I think that's actually the key thing. People have to care about where they are and decide that they want to put down roots, stick around, and make it better and support each other. And I think that's where that's about all I'm going to say for now. Thanks. Thank you to everyone. You're muted.
Yeah, I was, yes. Thank you. Very interesting. I'm going to, a couple of things I want to pick up on. The notion of having to care for the place, which I think also connects back to that that sense of the sacred that Andrew was talking about. I'm very interested in this notion of, particularly around connections. I've been talking a lot about that recently, and there's a film out that I am actually in called The Great Disconnect, and I have been using that film to talk about the fact that following COVID we need the great reconnect. So the idea of block parties that you talked about is completely in tune with that. But what I want to talk about, I want to pick up on this theme of connection in the sense of having the three of you talk about how you connect with your three different worlds. In a sense, we have the First Nation, we have the community group, and then we have the official council. And those are three very key groups, and you know each other, I know. But Andrew, I'm thinking maybe to start with you, because you sit in that sort of strange in-between world of working for and being closely identified with the Sooke Nation, and yet you also obviously are not of the Sooke Nation, and you were one of the founders, I gather, of Transition Sooke. So how do those connections work in terms of the three of you from your somewhat different roles to make things happen in Sooke? Because I think we can all learn from that.
Hi, yeah. Well, I think as you're hearing from that Sooke has always had a tradition of working together well with the indigenous community. The early settlers and the Sooke Nation worked really well to develop Sooke, and there was a lot of intermarrying. And I worked very closely with one of the elders. Together we went around the province supporting other First Nations develop their community plan. And she said that she never felt discrimination in Sooke. It was only when she moved to Victoria that she understood what that was about. So it has a very good background in integrating all the people who come to live in Sooke. So I think that's where it starts. It's a very good tradition that Sooke has developed, and you can still see it in our local newspaper. The last week, it was the Sooke News Mirror. There was a feature of one of the families on the, actually it's the chief's family, that the library had done a special feature on his family and going back sort of generations. So I think it's an appreciation of each other and the way we work together. So that's so we're just continuing that tradition that has been already set up and has worked well.
Michael, yes.
Yeah, in that regard, I would like to say that until COVID-19 came along, we were attending, many of us in the room here from Sooke, were attending monthly meetings with people from the First Nation, or people at large who from different tribes and so on, different First Nations. We brought them in as guest speakers, and there was 50, 60 people coming into this little old church that's now being made into a gift shop place. And, you know, we were learning things about their lives and how they see things from the Indigenous perspective. And it was just so rich. And I was so impressed that every time there'd be a lot of people there, you know, they really valued this. And I think for some of us, it's been difficult to really connect with people on the reserve. You almost have to know certain people that will connect you with others. Like when I first came here, there was Linda Bristol, who had been the chief of the South Nation, and she kind of became my teacher about protocol and things like that, and would wrap my knuckles when I made a doo-doo of some kind. But you know, that was very, in terms of the spirit of the place, I really think that's an example of what can happen, and it's a blessing to have a reserve right here in the middle of the town now, and they're precious, very precious indeed. Thank you.
And those monthly meetings, who's initiated and sponsored those? Was that coming from the First Nation or from the community or both?
It was a mixture. It was, there were reconciliation meetings, and the Linda Bristol, unfortunately she's passed away now, and others, and I think it was Margaret Critchlow who did a lot of the administration and pulling it together, and
right.
And then it was really a joint group from the nation and others who organized it all, and who asked in the speakers and things like that. So, but very well attended, yeah.
Speaking for myself, I think they made reconciliation accessible. A lot of the time, it's just this fancy, strange word and sounds kind of scary. But I heard Chief Plana speak and a few other people, and it's always been really, really wonderful and incredibly useful in so many ways.
So there was something else you said there. I know what it was that I wanted to pick up on, because I think it speaks to another of the sorts of connection. So Tony, you talked about running for office to make a difference, but you then went on to talk about the various advisory committees and committees that the council has that citizens sit on. And that's another way, it seems to me. You don't have to actually run for council. You can also volunteer to be part of committees, but I think those are the kind of things we can learn from.
Absolutely. I think that actually my own first experience was actually in the city of Coquitlam on an advisory council, and strangely enough with Selena Robinson, who was from Coquitlam at that point in time. That was really weird, by the way, seeing what she ended up doing, but that's another story. But you learn a little bit how the city works, or how local government works in committees. You have a chance to be a part of shaping policy. I think one of the key things is that often as private individuals, we don't actually get involved, we don't get engaged, we don't know how it works, and we're not sure how to get things done, or how to, we've got great ideas, but we don't know how to get those ideas in the right place to actually have them turn into policy that actually changes our community in the ways that we need. Being involved with committees is a great way to start, and to actually not even to start, but to actually make that change happen, but to start our own learning, if that's what we want to do.
I know that, in fact, two of our board members, Claire and Jasminder, are both on the Healthy Saanich Committee, for example. I suspect others who are on this call are on various committees. Folks, I'm going to throw this open to you for questions or comments. In order to do that, the best way, if you don't mind, is I think you should have a button at the bottom called reactions. And if you click on that button, you'll see one that says raise hand. And if you do that, that will help us to figure out who wants to speak. But in the meantime, and while you're figuring out that piece of sophisticated technology, a comment from Eric Doherty, because he comments that in Victoria, we have what he calls a full-on culture war. The pro-car, pro-pipeline, anti-transit, and cycling forces, and so on. And he wonders whether Sooke is somehow isolated from this, or do you have that same sort of challenge in Sooke? So let me just ask the three of you, or Eric, do you want to add to that, since you're sitting right there and I can see you?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to add to that. I don't know if you've noticed, but in the city of Victoria, there was a very modest proposal to do an interim change so that there's more space open to pedestrians and on Clover Point, people to enjoy the point, and less for parking. And led by certain elements of the local media, which always stir this stuff up, there was quite a heated reaction. And it is very much becoming a polarized city between those who want climate action, believe that a more livable city is possible and desirable, and those who want to go back to the days of the car as king and fossil fuels are great. And I'm just wondering, like, is it different in Sooke? Because to me, it doesn't seem like it is.
Can I take a stab at that?
Please.
Because my short answer would be no. No, actually, as our mayor has pointed out, parking is an issue in every community. And I think that parking really is, kind of like where the line is drawn in the sand. Is it more important to have space for cars or space for people? Is it more important that we have, places where we can actually walk, or should pedestrians just get off the road and get out of the way? And, let's get on with things. I think that ultimately the only thing that we can do as local government, and I'm going to talk with the councillor hat on for this one, is try as best we can to make sure that people actually have the choice of getting out of their car. I know that at this point in time, I live in a neighborhood where unless you get on a bike or a car, it really doesn't make sense, because it's going to take you 15 or 20 minutes minimum at a fair clip to walk to get a loaf of bread. There's no retail anywhere nearby. There isn't a corner store. You can't buy anything until you actually get into a car or travel a fair ways. So how do we actually, as local government and in general, encourage by making it possible for local amenities like stores and such to be in communities, especially when most suburbs are actually zoned for single use. So they don't even have the zoning to actually allow a little bit of retail, a corner store, a hairdresser, so on and so forth. And then if people actually talk about a pub, which I think would be the most brilliant thing to have in every neighborhood, then you've got everyone who's worried that they'll have drunks showing up at their lawn and so on and so forth saying, we don't want a pub at all. That's just crazy talk. You're going to drop our property values of the pub. So there's a huge need to create choices, but at the same time to shift the values so that people can actually appreciate a possible future. A lot of the time, all they see when you say, let's move away from the cars is you're going to make me walk all over the place and I don't want to. But what does it look like when you have a community where I can actually walk to get to a pub, to get to a coffee shop and actually have a chat with friends, and where I actually have friends, where that connection becomes possible and more important and actually more enriching than getting in a car and driving and commuting. If you actually asked a group of people that were commuting, who wants to commute, hardly anyone will raise their hands. So what we really want are jobs locally where you don't have to commute. But people have, we've had issues where We specifically had a daycare that wanted to set up, and they didn't have enough parking spots. So they went for a variance to try and get fewer parking spots. But the community got really quite irate at reducing the number of car parking spots because there were so many cars zooming around, and it's dangerous. It's already so dangerous with all the cars. Are you going to actually reduce the number of parking spots and create a daycare with fewer parking spots and bring in more cars? They were really screaming, we don't want more cars. But their answer was, add more parking spots. So there's a need to make that connection between creating, we're in a transition. It's hard for people who've lived with automobiles their entire lives to see a possibility of being able to actually get a loaf of bread and do the things you need without a car. Until we have more of those things into place, we need to reach a tipping point on allowing people to make the choice and being able to live reasonably comfortably without a car. And that's something that local government and all levels of government need to work together on. And honestly, it's not something that the average private individual can do. We've got lots of people that are really committed to cycling, but they take their lives into their hands. They don't know if their bike's going to be ripped off when it gets dropped off in some badly lit back corner where they can lock it up next to the grocery store. There's lots of stuff that can be changed, but those things need to change. And I don't know if that's a great answer, but there you go.
Thank you. I'm Michael. Yeah, and Michael, and then maybe we'll sort of actually bring this part of the session to a close with some, if there's any further comments from Michael and Andrew, because we will then break out into small groups after a short break. But Michael first and then Andrew.
Yeah, I did want to say that when we first arrived in 2004 from Alberta, as did many people, it felt very 50s in Sooke. The 50s mindset was still there with the loggers and the fishermen. And since that time, of course, in the last two decades or so, things have gotten from bad to worse with the fishery and with forestry. And so, you know, but it's changed, and it's been enough new blood coming in, and something about, I don't know what it is, whether it's the air or maybe the spirits around, the ancestors are there. Come on, get on with it, you know. It may be that people have just get drawn into the ideas that can free them up a bit more. Thank you.
Yeah, so there's no doubt there are divisions in Sooke, but I think there is a willingness to have conversations. There's one woman, Susan, I've forgotten her other name now. She'll go and, or she used to, just go and sit in a cafe and have conversations with people, not trying to convince anybody, but just having the conversation, which I think was brilliant. And I guess this is what we're doing here.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. And I mean, as I listen to this, you know, when we talk about our interest as conversations in broadening and deepening this conversation, one of the things that we put on hold because we didn't see an easy way to do it during COVID is kitchen table conversations, where and we want to set up a program of kitchen table conversations. As you see from our slogan, which is learn, discuss, understand, imagine, design, create. You can't do the imagine, design, create bit until you do the learn, discuss, understand bit. And we're really up at the learn, discuss, understand bit. And that's the intent of the deeper learning that Gary and Claire are working on. But the kitchen table conversations, the idea is to extend this out to you know, invite your neighbors, talk to your family, talk to your workmates over lunch, whatever it may be, but these small discussions, if we're not talking about it, and it's kind of one of our slogans, you know, we're not even, shouldn't we be talking about this? Shouldn't we be talking about this global ecological crisis and what it means in our communities and neighborhoods? And if we don't have that discussion, we're not going to fix anything. So it is the business we're trying to be in. What we want to do over the next while is how do we grow from probably the 70 or so people that we engage on a somewhat regular basis to 700 to 7,000 and then 70,000, and that's the challenge that we face. But thank you to our three presenters or speakers for being here and sharing their ideas. What we're going to do now is to break out. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and then we're going to break out into small groups, and Gertie and Claire have worked to put you into small groups. We haven't done it exactly on the basis of neighborhood, but just on municipality, because really the question is, given what's happening in Sooke, how could you do that in your municipality, whether it's Saanich or Oak Bay or wherever you are? And we've asked Andrew and Michael and Tony to join one of those groups so that we can seed their ideas into those groups. So my thanks to the three of you. My thanks to all of you for being here. And Gertie, I don't know if there's anything you need to say or anything before we take a 5-minute break, and then we'll break you out into small groups. And then we will reconvene at 6:45 for some feedback. And the idea of the feedback from the small groups is, were there sort of exciting things, ideas that you'd not thought of, or you went, aha, or something that even you decide you're going to do arising out of the discussion that we've had. So that's the intent of the small groups, is to how do you take it the next step, and what does that next step look like, and what ideas do you have around that? And if you get excited about anything, bring it back into our large group at 6:45.